So welcome again, everybody. This is Ken Smith. I'm the managing editor of Building Financial Resilience, and this is our podcast series, Resilience in Action. Today, we are really pleased to have Nick Lamparelli with us. He is the co-founder and CEO of the Insurance Advocacy Forum of Florida, and Nick has got his hands full down there in Florida. So, Nick, why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll go into a little bit about what the Advocacy Forum is doing.
Yeah, we sure do have our hands full. If it's not the hurricanes, it's the alligators. So, I am the co-founder and CEO of the Insurance Advocacy Forum of Florida. We are technically a startup, started last October. And a lot of the reason, Ken, why we started was, we're in the middle of an insurance crisis in Florida. And frankly, I've been quite disappointed in the trade associations and the lobbying groups that exist here in Florida. So part of why we're in a crisis, part of it is climate related. Florida has half of all of the hurricane risk in the United States. But the other part of the crisis is self-inflicted wounds. We have a regulatory and a legislative um, conundrum that's occurring here. I would call it a legal or a litigation crisis or a litigation abuse that's occurring here. And it basically took us to we had to get to a cliff. We were looking down at the abyss of having a state that was almost uninsurable because of this litigation crisis. And the legislative sessions in Florida, including special sessions, came in and created a whole new series of regulation to remedy that particular problem. And one thing that has kind of emerged from that as we're trying to see if these re-regulations are actually working, is that the folks that have benefited most from the litigation abuse are really have a united front and a strong messaging around, hey, we've just gutted consumer protection to the benefit of these greedy insurance companies. And Ken, I frankly sat there and waited for our trade associations and our lobbying groups to put up some sort of defense around this, and I saw nothing. So after a while, it was like, uh, I guess I'll have to kick the hornet's nest and do the necessary things. So the goal of this group is to create a united front, is to create a ballast of information, education to the media, to Tallahassee, to business owners, to insurance buyers, and even to insurance professionals on what are the legislative and regulatory elements that need to exist for Florida to have a stable insurance marketplace, for us to be able to have lots of different options in insurance. You'll notice that I didn't say the word affordable. Availability and affordability are two separate things. We are quite focused on availability now, and we'll focus our attention later on affordability, but you can't have affordability if you don't have availability. So that's the goal of this group, is to create a networking and a collaborative effort here in Florida for those that are worried about Florida insurance to stabilize it.
Well, you got a tall task ahead. I'll tell you what, though, for our listeners, let's take a step back here. You got some challenges down there. As you said, 50% of the hurricane risk goes through Florida. You talked about the insurance companies withdrawing and the alternatives. What are, just from a climate perspective, what are you facing down there? Because I know it's not just the hurricane. It can be a thunderstorm with much higher wind and a larger amount of rain. We're hearing about places like South Florida where just on a full moon, the sewer systems are backing up from the ocean. And so many miles inland, you're basically getting 12 to 14 inches of water flooding the city, but there's a clear full moon out there. So can you talk a little about what some of these challenges are down there?
Florida has some of the most wicked weather in the United States. So like if you live in Florida and you don't and you look at this map and it doesn't scare you, then something's wrong with you. It is every summer. We have to worry about this. It's almost like all highways cross through Florida for when it comes to hurricanes. So we do get 50% of the hurricanes, but um, this just tells part of the story. We get, we're a peninsula jutting out on top of basically a coral reef and in very warm water. So we get tropical activity from April all the way through November. So we don't necessarily need just hurricanes to occur. We get excessive rainfall, which of course can lead to flooding. In the fall, we get what's called king tide. So where the moon is and where the earth is tilted, we get unusual high tide. So God help us if we get a significant hurricane during that period. But we don't need a significant hurricane for us to get flooding. And if you go on YouTube, you'll see lots of videos of Miami being flooded with no activity, no rain. It doesn't have to rain. We just get unusual high tides because of rising sea levels, the moon, where it is, and the time of the year. So we have that. But not only that, we are the lightning capital of the United States and the sinkhole. Did I mention that we were a peninsula on a coral reef?
Florida
We are the
is the
sink
sinkhole capital.
of the United States as well. So we have lots of issues. That peninsula on the coral reef is really interesting because the sinkholes occur when water gets underneath and dissolves the limestone that we're sitting on top of. So we have significant climate issues. It does not necessarily have to be just wind related. Excess rain can be highly problematic here. Excess rain in the wrong season can cause significant flooding here in Florida. So, and to top it all off, I didn't even mention tornadoes, which is we are one of the top states in the country. Nothing really compared to Tornado Alley, but outside of Tornado Alley, Florida is one of the top states for tornadoes as well. So it's rough.
If
The last thing we need, so they had that movie Sharknado. If we get alligator NATO, we have plenty. I have a pond right out here. There's probably some alligators in there, right? Like if it's not one thing, it's another.
So if anybody's interested, check out an earlier podcast where I interviewed a couple of friends who bought a home in Key West, Florida, and we talked through their thought process in terms of what were the risks, what do they have to do, how do they have to go find insurance, et cetera. And that's Key West. So now really, diving deep into the situation that you're trying to solve for. This is a recent article, folks, on the right-hand side from Insurance Business, that they recently declared that Florida's insurer of last resort, which is basically a state program, is no longer solvent. So it's one thing to have access to insurance. It's another thing for that insurance to be affordable. And then there's a whole nother issue of whether or not the insurance company is in fact solvent enough that if you file a claim, they will be able to pay out that claim. So this is really your bread and honey right here. Tell me a little bit about your top priorities for the forum.
Interestingly, the Florida insurer of last resort is not the Florida insurer of last resort. They're actually the number one writer of insurance in the state of Florida. It's actually quite easy to get access to them. There are laws that are being put in place to try to actually make them the insurer of last resort. But they have, I believe, in excess of 1 million policies. So
Wow.
technically they're, and because they're a state agency, sort of, it puts the taxpayers of Florida in significant jeopardy should something go wrong. So that's one of the things that we talk about significantly. But our top priorities for 2024 is to create content to educate and influence key stakeholders. I mentioned the stakeholders were insurance buyers, but also the media, Tallahassee, regulators, legislators. It's to educate them. We spoke to a former legislator who's very much focused on these issues, Ken. And when at one of our events, when someone asked them why hasn't, why did Tallahassee take so long to do anything? Um, his funny remark, which isn't so funny in hindsight, is that he thinks there's probably 1.5 people in Tallahassee that actually know how insurance works, which
Hmm.
is scary, that insurance is really, I like your word bread and honey. Insurance is bread and honey for Florida. Florida's very much a tourist and real estate state. So you can't have real estate without insurance. So insurance is part and parcel, a requirement and necessity here in the state of Florida. And if you have a legislature that does not understand how insurance is supposed to work, that creates a significant problem. So one is to create content. That's a tall order, Ken. This isn't just like posting things on social media. If we're reaching insurance buyers, where are they? Well, they're everywhere, right? They're using TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. How am I supposed to reach them? It's going to be a tall order for us to create content that's going to be engaging enough that a typical Florida citizen will be intrigued enough to grab onto it. But we also have to reach the legislators as well. Where are they? They're all over the place as well. So it's we have a lot of work to do, not only creating the content, but finding the right platforms in order to do that. And we're hoping we can reach out to media and have them kind of create a shortcut for us. We have been holding events. We've focused them predominantly as network style events. So we've been predominantly in Tampa and in Fort Lauderdale. We've had panel sessions to create some insights and some buzz around some of the things that are happening. We serve food, we serve alcohol. Don't say anything, Ken. So it's a really inexpensive and a lot of value that you get for those 3 hours for those networking sessions. But so far, we've seen, businesses actually getting conducted. Folks are connecting with each other afterwards, which is a big part of what we need to do, which is to tear down silos, is to get the state legislators to talk to the insurance buyers, to talk to the insurance professionals, to get agents talking to carriers, carriers talking to reinsurers, kind of break down some silos, getting the claims professionals to talk to one another. So those have worked well, but we're starting to transition to workshops and hopefully by the end of the year, like legit conferences where we can do some significant promotion and have 1 to 2 day events. And finally, it's conducting and publishing our own research as well. What does it take to actually have a stable insurance market? We need to do things like showing whether these reforms are working. How many if Florida has, Ken, here's a nerdy stat for you. Florida has roughly 10% of all the claims, property casualty claims in the United States, but
10%?
10%, but 80% of all litigated claims. That is what's causing our insurance crisis.
What do you mean
And
by
these
what is a litigated claim?
That is a claim where the claimant is suing the insurance company. It's going to go to an arbitration or to a judge for
So
settlement.
the claimant probably filed a claim and did not feel as though they got satisfaction, and so now they need to take the legal action.
Yes. And so part of the crisis that we've had is that the trial attorneys here in Florida have figured out that if you flood the system with claims, insurance companies are much more likely to settle with you and settle beforehand so it does not go that far because there are all kinds of damages that can occur if you allow a claim to go all the way to trial and to a judgment. So that becomes a big problem. So are these reforms working? That requires analytics, Ken. That requires
Hmm.
someone to dig into the numbers and to figure out what are the trends on some of these? And there are all sorts of indicators that can point to, where are we in the different stages. Currently, there's still a lot of litigated claims that have not made their way entirely through the system. There are a lot of Hurricane Ian claims, which I call the pig and the python. So that was the last major hurricane, and there are several 100,000 claims that are still in litigation around that. So we need to wait and see where those go. But so far, it does appear that post Ian claims are showing a significant drop off in its propensity to be litigated. So, but someone has to do this research. Someone has to compile that data. Someone has to interpret it. Someone has to, these are real legitimate research reports that can be turned into white papers, and also content going back to step one that has to be then shoveled back to Tallahassee. Hey, this is working, this is not working, this is what we need to do here. We need to do more of this and less of that, so on and so forth.
And we'll touch on this a little bit later, but Hurricane Ian was when?
Hurricane Ian was, I live here in Southwest Florida.
A
I
couple of years
believe it was
ago?
late September 2022.
And people are still having their claim litigated, which is one of the reasons, again, we'll talk about this a little bit later, our focus on financial resilience. If you have insurance, good for you. If you can afford it, good for you. But if you then have to file a claim and it's got to go to litigation, you're now 12, 18, 24 plus months away from seeing a check. Meanwhile, you got to work. You got to buy a new car. You got to fix your roof. Your kids got to go to school. There's all kinds of things that need to happen in the intervening time frame. And that's one of the other big challenges that folks are facing all over the country. So with all this work ahead, this is the way, folks, that you can help out. There's sponsorship opportunities. Talk a little bit about the way that folks can get involved and support the work that you do. Not just in Florida, by the way, because this is going to have an impact on everybody around the country.
And our plan, Ken, is to pick this up and take it to other states where we are having the same climate conversation. We're having the same. California is having the same issues,
Yeah.
right? California is probably 3 years behind Florida, right? So my expectations are that California is in a world of hurt because they're 3 years behind us. So that hard market in California just seems to progressively get worse. I believe, was it Travelers that just pulled out?
Yep.
Last week?
And that was because of fire, actually. That wasn't because of the big floods down in San Diego. It was because of fire. And I think when you think about the top three, the big three, Florida, Texas, and California, Florida faces so many challenges with respect to severe weather. Mainly, as you talked about, they are tropical in nature. But then you look at Texas, they've got a 1 million acre fire going, and it's March. And they do get hurricanes, and they also get severe heat, and they get multiple different times of
and tornadoes and hail and straight line wind.
And man, the same thing's out in California. If it's not burning, it's pouring, and then the earth shakes. So anyway, what can people do to help your organization?
So we will be picking this up and bringing this to other states, but right now we are in Florida. So if you are in Florida, the best way is to come to one of our networking events in Tampa and in Fort Lauderdale, which we post on our website, insuranceadvocacyfl.org is where the list of events
right there.
Yeah. Insuranceadvocacyfl.org is where you can learn about these particular events. If you're a B2B firm in the insurance space, we're getting some, we're execs, we're getting regulators, we're getting legislators, we're getting some significant folks, CEOs of insurance companies are coming to some of these events. So we are looking for sponsors, and the sponsorship package goes well beyond just us patting you on the back at one of our networking events. It includes a podcast through Insurance Nerds, and we look for lots of different ways to continuously promote your wares, and that will include some of these workshops, which will be half day, 1 day workshops at a reinsurer or at an insurance company, where we will bring you in as well. So we'll bring you a significant amount of exposure for our sponsors and try to deliver a lot of value.
And there is Nick's email right down there if anybody wishes to reach out directly. We encourage you to do this. This is an important program. And again, I think more than anything else, the research and the data around what is working and what is not working, and how can you really create the access, as you say, that is the first most important step. Then we can get to affordability, and then we can get to solvency. But without the access, you're not going to get to those first two. And we're seeing this. So if anybody doesn't know, there were $22 billion severe weather events in the United States just last year, 22. So this is work that is going to be rolling out around the country. It's absolutely necessary, and it may well be the model for a national program. So encourage folks to go to Nick's website, email him, support, do what you can. The other thing you can do for yourself is be a little bit better prepared. So this is our blog series. We talk about various different types of financial resilience. But really what we recommend folks do is just 3 simple things. Number 1, create a 5 to 10 year financial plan and assume that you're going to have one severe major weather event, one catastrophic event in that time frame. Number 2, optimize what insurance coverages are available. So for example, you may not be able to get flood insurance in certain areas. You may through FEMA, you may not because of the location of the home or your income level or what have you, but there's other things that you can do. You can get, for example, art insurance if you happen to have a collection, and you don't have to have, pieces that would be hanging in a gallery. These could simply be a couple of $1,000s worth per piece. You can get art insurance. You can get an umbrella policy that could help you in certain other areas. In some cases, you can get coverage through a manufacturer of a consumer electronics device, a washer dryer that may be down in your basement, that could potentially get covered in the event of a severe weather event. So talk to your insurance agent about what other options are available to you. Don't just think property insurance and flood insurance. And most importantly, and this I think, Nick, really gets back to your comments about content and education, we really encourage folks to invest the time and the money in event cost mitigation. Get smart. Where is your house? Are you up on a hill? Are you down in a valley? Where's the nearest drain for freshwater runoff? What are the risks that are posed around you? We've seen a lot of pictures where an entire neighborhood will get completely devastated, but one house survives. And when you see that one house, that is the one house that dug a trench around, that ran the water off, that hardened its roof, that did all of those things necessary. And literally their entire neighborhood got wiped out, and that one house is still there. So we really encourage you, go to courses like Nick's, learn about what the risks are and what you can do. And if you would like, this is just a brief primer. This is our book, Building Financial Resilience for an Uninsurable World. We encourage you to read it. It's available on Amazon, hardback, paperback, and in electronic version if you would like that as well. And of course, please come back to buildingfinancialresilience.com. We just posted another blog. This podcast will be up in a couple of days. And so thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you again at the next event. Thank you very much, Nick.
Thanks, Ken.